During bird migration season, they dim their rooftop lights so they don't interfere with bird migration. So that building taught us a very valuable lesson. Which brings us back to the tallest building in Chicago, the Empress of the Sky, the Sears, or Willis Tower, depending on who you ask. Now, back in 1974, Sears department store built the tallest building in the world right here in Chicago. That was the Sears Tower. Now, Sears sold the building in the early 90s. They moved out to the suburbs, which was a bummer for us. They were a large employer here. But then back in 2009, the Willis Insurance Group from the UK, they came to Chicago and they signed a lease for 3 floors of office space in the Sears Tower out of 110 total floors. In that lease was a little clause that said for an extra $1 million a year, they could also lease the naming rights. So, for $1 million a year, Willis Insurance Group used to call that building Willis Tower. Willis, I lived in Chicago long enough, I consider myself a little life of this. I'm stubborn. So I still call it Sears Tower. Chicagoans are very stubborn people. Why do you think we keep living here winter after winter? But this is the perfect place to take a photo of the Sears Tower, folks. You get to see pretty much the entire height. And speaking of the height, it clocks in at 1,451 feet tall. That's 442 meters for our international friends. But how do we measure the specific height of a skyscraper, right? What are the rules? Where do you start measuring? Where do you stop measuring? And who sets that measuring process? Well, that would be the very creatively named Council on Tall Buildings. They've determined to measure the height of a skyscraper. You start at the bottom of the lowest public doorway and you measure to the top of the structure or permanent spire. And here's the thing, folks. Those antennas on the top of the Sears Tower, they are not considered permanent. So they don't count as spires, which means they don't count towards the height of the building. So that height is just the roof of the Sears Tower. But I think that makes the record just even more incredible. But the tallest building in the world right now is the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. It's over 2,700 feet tall. That makes it close to twice as tall as the Sears Tower. Pretty incredible, right? And in fact, Burj Khalifa was designed by none other than Chicago's very own world's tallest architect, Adrian Smith, who I mentioned on the tour earlier. So again, that tells you why he has that nickname. But quick glimpse, if you look up here at the Sears through this gap, you can see 5 glass boxes sticking out of the side of the tallest tower up there. That's the 103rd floor. It's called the Sky Deck, and those boxes are called the Ledge. And if you want, you can get a ticket, take an elevator up to that floor, walk out into one of those glass boxes, look through the glass floor over 1,000 feet down the street below. And if that sounds like fun to you, go for it. Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world, but he cheated. He used some climbing gear for that one. Of course, both of those guys were also very successfully arrested when they made it down to the ground, because as it turns out, very legal to climb a skyscraper. Don't recommend it. Not great for your mental health or your permanent record. All right, how we doing, guys? You doing okay, yeah? Hey, I gotta say, I really admire y'all sticking it out on this boat ride with your ponchos. Always makes it more of an adventure, so I appreciate that. All right, folks, we got Art Deco Alley coming up ahead. Remember Riverside Plaza? That was the Art Deco building that began our evolution of architecture. Well, right across the river from that is yet another Art Deco building from the same year, 1929. In fact, these two buildings were built just a few weeks apart from each other. The one on the right is the Civic Opera building. And I love these buildings' location because they honestly each made opposite sides of the same bet. Riverside Plaza, they said, you know what, someday this city is going to clean up this disgusting river. And we're ready for that day. We're going to have the front of the building looking down on the river. But then the Opera building, they were like, nope, it's always going to be disgusting. Let's have the back of the building face the river. I think it's pretty obvious which building won that bet, right? Riverside Plaza has great views. But that doesn't mean that the Opera building is any kind of a slouch. This is actually the second largest opera house in the country. It's got 3,600 seats, currently home to Lyric Opera of Chicago, which is a world-famous opera company. Had a very successful few seasons. And you might notice, too, that the structure, it goes up higher on the sides here, and then there's a portion of the building that sits further back from the river that goes even taller. It's because it was designed to look like a throne. So this is the seat, armrests, and the back of it up there. And there's also a functional reason, a practical reason for that design. They wanted to add additional office space up above the Opera House so that they could rent out that office. So they didn't last, the opera company didn't last long, the original company didn't, but they really set up future companies for success. All right, folks, don't forget, you got your bartender, Zach, at the back of the boat scene. There are over 200 theater and performance companies in the city of Chicago, so any given night, if you're looking for a live performance, you have so many options to choose from, right? You got plays, musicals, comedies, tragedies, Shakespeare, opera, contemporary dance, ballet, sketch comedy, improv, blues, jazz, rock and roll, punk. You get it. Anything you want, we got it. If you're looking for discounted tickets, the app Gold Star is an excellent way to find discounted performance tickets here in Chicago. You can always find something interesting. Sometimes I just pull the app up, I'm like, what's playing tonight? Let me find something. Go check it out. But of course, we can't talk about performance in Chicago without mentioning the Second City, famous comedy club here in Chicago. It has started the careers of many famous comedians, people like Bill Murray, Tina Fey, Rachel Dratch. And they have live shows on weekends. They also have late shows that I don't recommend taking the kids to, but they have all kinds of shows for everyone: sketch comedy, improv, scripted theater. So if you're looking for some good, fun times, seeing some performances, check out the Second City. Again, 7 nights a week, they got performances available to you. All right, folks, we are making our way back to Wolf Point for the second time as we're headed back out towards our dock at Navy Pier. And as we make it back to Wolf Point, I just want to quickly point out that to your left is the North Branch. So we're on our shortened tour right now on the shoulder months, so we're not going to go up the North Branch. But the North Branch, if you go up there, that's the site where we're potentially going to be building a casino. So there are plans to build a casino in Chicago, and it's going to be up there on the North Branch. But now we're here at Wolf Point, we can finally talk about this building. One of my absolute favorites to your right, this Kirby Glass building. This is the New Bean building from 1983, and it is another really stunning example of contextualism. Here's why. The curve of the building imitates the curve of the river, and then you have 2 rows of different colored glass. The blue reminds us of the sky above, and the green reminds us of the river below. So this building is very much in relationship with this specific location, right? That's why you couldn't pick it up and put it somewhere else. It wouldn't look quite right. But also, fun fact, this is the building where, in the little-known Chicago documentary, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And it's just an incredible movie. I recommend it to everyone. If you want to see some Chicago sights, check out Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It's also just a really good movie. I think the message is very important for where we are in the world right now. You know, movies about this high schooler who skips school for a day, goes on some wacky adventures. And I think that it's really relevant to remember, you know, as Ferris Bueller says, to enjoy life before it passes you by, right? I think we can all agree on that. For the past 3 years, things have been going on. You know, enjoying our present moment is a good place to start. We're off to a great start here on the Chicago River, looking at all these pretty buildings, so well done. But folks, we got the merchandise mart. Back on the left, this was the first Art Deco building we talked about. Front of the building is about 2.5 acres in size, which is perfect for that glass box to your right, mounted on the side of the Riverwalk. Inside that box, 34 projectors, $8 million system. Every night, from about mid-April to late mid-December, that box displays digital animated art every single night on the walls of the merchandise mart. It's called Art on the Mart, and it is incredible. They rotate the artists throughout the year. They've really started outdoing themselves in recent years. A lot of the projections have been part live action, part digital animation. So you got giant people dancing and moving across the walls surrounded by these explosions of colorful digital animation. And they make sure, they use lasers to design these projections, and they make sure that none of the light shines through any of the windows so that they don't disturb the people that are working inside, which is pretty cool. But again, Art on the Mart, if you're here between April and December, every single night. It happens twice a night. Quick, folks, up ahead above the LaSalle Street Bridge, I think the most underrated view on the tour. I like to think of this as an architectural puzzle of Chicago's history. Yeah, each building represents a different part of our story, a different time period here. You got Art Deco, you got contemporary buildings, you got some contextualism, you got some revivalist styles in there. So I'm going to hop off the mic here for just a brief moment. I want to encourage you, we've already gone down this part of the river, take some photos, look around, see what your eye catches. I'm going to get back on the mic up ahead at the Clark Street Bridge. Is a true Chicagoan. It's stubborn to its core, right? All these flashy modern skyscrapers popping up all around it, but it says, look, I'm short, I'm angry, I'm covered in concrete, and I'll never change. And I really appreciate that. Crowd favorite coming up ahead, folks, a little to the right. Above the Morton's Steakhouse sign, you can see that narrow green tower with the gold trim on top. This is the Carbide and Carbon Building, another Art Deco structure from 1929. And it was built during Prohibition. That's the period in U.S. history when alcohol was against the law. You couldn't make it, you couldn't sell it, you couldn't drink it. So it's believed that the architects of this building, the Burnham brothers, sons of Daniel Burnham, right? So you got the green glass of the champagne bottle and that gold trim up on top, that's the gold foil wrapped around your cork, right? And it's actually real 24 karat gold leaf too, but it's half the thickness of saran wrap, so not a lot of value up there, don't go straight. Now, as we're making our way back down here, I just want to quickly draw your attention. See this stretch of 4 buildings here to the right, built right up against each other? This is very unique in Chicago, especially on the river, right? We have a lot more space here in Chicago. We have a lot more space here, right? We've been around a little bit less time than some of the East Coast cities like Boston, New York City, right? So this would be a lot more common in cities like New York and Boston, right? Buildings built right next to each other. They run out of space, right? They don't have as much to use, but if you look to the left, you can see all the space we have around our buildings here in Chicago. And I like to think it's also a good representation of our vibes, right? We're kind of chill here in Chicago, like to sit back, relax, take up space. But remember the Wrigley Building with the clock tower, the first building, our second cathedral is slowly coming into view just to its right, a little further back, Chicago Tribune Tower. Now, I call this one a cathedral because it was also much Gothic revival style. Now, this design was actually the winning design in the competition hosted by the Chicago Tribune. That's the city's largest newspaper. In the 20s, they hosted a competition looking for the design of the world's most beautiful building. And that won. So this was believed to be the most beautiful building in the world at that time, at least here in Chicago. Now, to make sure everyone else agreed, they went around the world, took chunks of stone from famous architectural marvels and stuck them on the side of the building, like the Great Wall of China, Parliament House in the UK, Taj Mahal, among others. Quick glimpse of that building with the gold dome on top between Wrigley and Tribune. You see that? It's got what also looks like a chimney. Now that is the Hotel Intercontinental, and you just get a short glimpse of it, but I love its story, which is why I pointed it out. Now, the roof was originally designed as a dock mooring for blimps. So that smokestack was a blimp dock. And the onion dome, the yellow dome, was designed as a marker so blimps could spot the roof from far away. So it was intended for blimps to dock on the roof of the hotel and visitors would exit downstairs. Here's the thing, from 1927 to 37, the first 10 years of that building's life, not a single blimp docked up there. And then in 1937, the Hindenburg exploded. That was a large German blimp. When that exploded, the rest of the world was like, you know what? I don't think we're gonna do blimps anymore. So they never got to use their blimp dock. But now they have that very recognizable yellow dome on top, and so it works out well for them. It's a beautiful hotel, fantastic place to stay here downtown when you visit. Well, what about this one here, folks? You can see the iconic NBC peacock logo up there near the roof. Now this is NBC Tower. And I'm going to point out the 3 key traits of this style. Racing striped windows, repetitive patterns, covered in limestone. What style might you guess this is? Art Deco, I heard someone say it. That's a great guess. Here's the thing. This building was built in 1989, so 70 years after Art Deco style is popular. But it was modeled after 30 Rockefeller Plaza in New York City, which is NBC's headquarters. It was built in the 20s as an Art Deco building. But since this is a modern version of the Art Deco style, we don't call it Art Deco, we call it Echo Deco, which is just a cutesy way of saying modern version of the Art Deco style. I will say, every single season of one of the classiest daytime television talk shows in U.S. history was shot right there in NBC Tower. The Jerry Springer Show. Yeah, you thought I was going to say Oprah. Nope, the opposite of Oprah. But shows like The Judge Mathis Show, Steve Harvey, shot right there in NBC Tower. So it's still one of NBC's very active studios here in the U.S. Judge Mathis is currently filmed